Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Marianne Petrie. I have a brand new guest. His name is Anthony Kensell. He is the founder and CEO of Pro Se Dad, an organization of over 10,000 dads whose focus is to guide, support, and empower fathers going through custody and life issues. Temporarily leaving his 20-year IT career due to his own custody issue, Anthony would teach himself family law, pursue a paralegal degree, and ultimately worked at a family law firm. Seeing all sides of the dysfunctional court system and process, Anthony would also have a brief run for state assemblyman. Not satisfied with the limited potential to effect true change from the inside, Anthony returned to his IT career and launched Pro Se Dad. Most recently, Anthony is the founder and chair of the Pro Se Family Foundation, a 501c3 not-for-profit organization that will use technology to educate, train, and empower Pro Se families, modernize access to information and court processes, and provide legal and charitable assistance to dads, children, and families. So I totally welcome you to the show, Mr. Kensell. And, what is Pro Se Dad? And I know you got involved in this with your own litigation in family court, but how did all this start for you?
Awesome. Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. It's an honor, and I appreciate any opportunity that I can get to kind of voice, the concerns of obviously a lot of fathers out there.
Mhm.
Well, Pro Se that is basically a culmination of a need that I needed when I went through my own situation, probably about 10 to 11 years ago at this point. At that time, you know, um, single single household dads, single fathers really wasn't, that much of a thing or an in thing. And there were quite a few, while there were some resources, there was a lot of limited resources, as in actionable resources. What I was finding during that time was just kind of sort of a place for support and a place to get a little bit of information, but it really didn't kind of walk me through not only what I needed to do, but also support me emotionally kind of along the way.
Mhm.
So as as you stated, I ended up leaving my IT career, kind of dove into family law and taught myself that. Ended up going to get a paralegal degree and so forth. And throughout that process, um, as I ended up learning more case law, I ended up learning more statutes. Um, and as I went still trying to battle my own situation, I was still losing. Um,
Mhm.
and what was kind of surprising was that prior to the separation, I was actually the primary. So it was just a little tricky in
Mhm.
that I thought that, the courts would understand that.
Mhm.
But what happens, I think, a lot of times is that we just don't know. So that's why during that process, I decided, well, once I get past this myself, I want to try to start up an organization that's able to kind of almost handhold you through what you need to do and is able to give you direct answers
Mhm.
as to where you find yourself in your own situation, in your own plight. And that was the genesis of Pro Se Dad.
Mhm. So, like, when people call you, they probably also need emotional support. I know you're not a psychologist, but, I'm sure you find yourself giving emotional support to people that are just need someone to talk to.
Absolutely. I mean, I think what, I kind of pride myself that we've been able to build, this group to is, we've been able to kind of weed out um, kind of just like a venting, situation, but more of a, hey, this is a kind of true and tested approach, right?
Mhm,
And this is what you are going to be experiencing right now. This is why you necessarily, as you just stated, we have a lot of situations where we have dads who want to do the right thing and they
mhm,
want to still continue to maybe leave the house, right? And
mhm,
let mom stay in the house with the kids, not realizing the predicament that's going to put them in when it comes to court, right? We have a lot
mhm,
of dads that come at it and they want to continue to support the kid or support the household and, pay all this money into the household, not realizing that the predicament that's going to put them in. So you have a lot of internal conflicts that you kind of have to battle
mhm,
so you're almost being an ex, partner, a dad, and a litigant kind of all at the same time. And a lot of
mhm,
times, all those emotions, can get quite overwhelming. So
mhm,
we do find a lot of dads reaching out, just literally not knowing what to do, right? Like,
mhm,
should I leave? Shouldn't I leave? Should I file? Should I not file? Should I reply? You know what I mean? And
mhm,
it just becomes quite overwhelming. In addition to the toll of now going through that court process.
mhm,
That's I wouldn't say that it's not necessarily friendly to dads. It's just that dads are kind of inexperienced going through that.
mhm,
Dads don't traditionally are aware as to what that process is, and you know, not for nothing, a lot of women kind of know what
mhm,
you do, right? You separate, you file, right? You file for custody, you file for child support, you file for alimony. Meanwhile, dads are just kind of like just trying to find where to live or what to do.
mhm,
Um, and then kind of like the perfect storm ensues,
mhm.
because of
Some people divorce amicably, and that can work for a while, and because we had divorced amicably for and we were amicable somewhat for almost 10 years until he remarried a woman who worked in the courthouse.
that.
So it's like
Mhm.
so then parents find themselves going through attorneys. I don't know, I went through 4 of them, ineffective attorneys.
Mhm.
So then I went pro se. So do you ever get like uh grandmothers calling in, moms calling in saying, "What do we do now?"
You know what? And that's a great point. You know, just to highlight a little bit the foundation we started, named the Pro Se family because the reality is that it's not just dad going through this. And honestly, it's not even just mom going through it,
Mhm,
right? It's dad and the brothers and significant others, it's the parents, it's the uncles. I mean, it's everybody is
mhm,
actually going through this journey with you. And absolutely, we have grandfathers and grandmothers saying, "I want to see the kid, and I can't see them," and
mm.
and and so forth. So it's such a chaos,
Oh,
and
yes.
you're absolutely right, in that you then go and you try to reach out to these attorneys, and you only have $5,000, $10,000, and they're only going to do so much, right?
Mhm,
And to a certain degree in working at a family law office, one of the things that I think, I really can appreciate now is that I think that attorneys at heart probably start from a good place.
mhm,
Um, but I think also just reality of life kicks in. Like there's only so much time in a day
mhm.
and they have a business to run, right? And they're
Yeah.
going to prioritize, the bigger clients versus the smaller clients. It's just the
Mhm,
nature of life almost, and I myself found myself in that predicament. And one of the things that I decided was, well, even if I'm not necessarily pro se, I'm going to be the best client I can be. So I need to find out, well, why can't I do that? Or
mhm,
why doesn't this work? Why doesn't that work? Or why do I have to, position exhibits in this manner, not in that manner? Why isn't this a good exhibit, but this is,
mhm,
because a lot of times I come at this, what do I know? I just know the movies, right? And what we
mhm,
see on
mhm,
TV. And we think we're going to have those aha moments. And we think the judge is going to come and be like, why? And, have this great moment. And it's none of that, you
mhm,
know? Um, And I think we tend to find ourselves in these predicaments that we're not being affected emotionally. We have reached out to the attorneys. We're now exhausted. We don't have the funds anymore. Now what do we do? And
Mhm.
that's really where we really kind of step in. I mean, I would say 90% of the folks in our group are those that went the attorney route and they've exhausted their retainers and now they're still having issues, right? So now
Mhm.
what do you do? Um, and it's a real flaw. I think it's a real flaw, I think, in the overall process.
Mhm.
And I don't think it lends itself to a true amicable solution. Ironically, mom and I, in my own personal case, we're great now. She lives
Mhm.
9 minutes away. We at the games we hang out with her husband, my wife. We watch their dogs. I mean,
Uh-huh.
and it's great. And one of the things I came to realize is that when you put yourself into this process, you interject yourself, right? Because it's just what you do.
Mhm.
You're getting separated. I'm gonna go speak to an attorney. I'm gonna go speak to an attorney. Everybody goes in their corners. And now the attorneys, I think, genuinely are trying to do what's best for their client. And in that process, though, you start kind of feeling like, oh, I have to go this way,
Mhm.
right? You become kind of part of that overall cog, whether intentionally or unintentionally. The attorneys and just the process kind of takes over because what do you know? So I have to follow this. The attorney says I have to follow it. I'm going to follow that. I know
Mhm.
that happened a lot of times in my own case. Now, as we look back, and we look back on it and I say, man, we just wasted 3 or 4 years of our lives,
Mhm.
all this money when it could have all gone right, to our son. And we could have just moved on with our life so much quicker and so
Mhm.
much faster. And that's where I see a lot of opportunity and where the foundation is really going to try to step in. The pro se dad is more kind of an advocacy, hands-on kind of approach where the foundation, we're going to be looking at trying to modernize
Mhm.
what we consider the antiquated system,
Mhm.
as well as just the overall process of information back and forth between, counselors and therapists and
Mhm.
gals and right, all that thing. And oh, I'm waiting on this report. Oh, I'm waiting for the judge to give me this, and I'm waiting for that. It's a matter of technology really also being utilized, which
Mhm.
is going to be one of our main strengths that we're going to try to, introduce into this particular community.
Mhm. And that's quite a task, you know, because, like attorneys and even doctors, I think they take on too many clients at once, and there's just too much, and I don't know, I'm sure you have people that are calling constantly at your place.
Correct. So we the way we live try to limit calls, but so we basically the way we set it up is we've been able to organize our news feed specifically on Facebook as our main form of communication. And we've set it up with an extraordinary team of moderators and group experts to basically field, these questions or concerns as they come through. Um, because one of the things that I think probably goes really underappreciated is the severity of what you feel at the moment where you find yourself, right? The
Mhm.
feeling of desperation of, I
Oh.
just received this notice. I have no idea what to do. What does this mean? Am I going to lose custody? Am I trying to see, my baby girl and I can't? And I
Mhm.
mean, listen, we've lost a lot of dads along the way, because of the trauma that this is.
Mhm.
So, we initially had attempted to kind of go at it as a normal intake and review situation.
Mhm.
But to your point is that it's just so many situations kind of occurring
Mhm.
simultaneously that we needed to come at it differently and say we need to almost do it as like a crowd sourcing, crowd healing approach, right?
Mhm.
Um, but we also can't have the blind leading the blind, because
Right. Yeah.
that happens a lot too, right? Is that
Mhm.
I don't know, I just know what I think I know, and I'm just trying to give advice. But meanwhile, I'm just creating more chaos. So
Mhm.
I think what has kind of separated us from a lot of the organizations out there is that we really do a concerted effort to highlight and promote um, group experts
Mhm.
and to minimize any type of dysfunction within the group itself.
Mhm.
So absolutely, we try to limit, and I know this is big on court corruption, but we try to limit the core focus on court corruption in
Mhm.
the sense of, yes, it could be. Judges could be corrupt, lawyers could be corrupt, everybody could be corrupt. But there are still rules to that corruption, right? You still need to understand why they're being corrupt. You need to be able to articulate, well, the judge, according to the judge's bench book, violated such and such and such an order. The attorney violated such and such ethical provision, right? The
Mhm.
state statute states I have a right, my child has a right, for presumption 50-50. She hasn't upheld that. So, the way we try to position it is it may be corrupt, but that's just the start, right?
Mhm.
We're not going to allow you to use it as an scapegoat to not do the work to name the corruption, to
Mhm.
know the corruption, right? Because that's the only time that we can then really address, is it corruption to the true definition of the word corruption, in that the judge is deliberately doing this action?
Mhm.
Or did the judge rule correctly and you just don't understand what that ruling is? So it seems as if she's ruling against you. I had that happen to me a few
Mhm.
times where I would come out of, you know, hearings and so forth and be like, oh, well, that's not fair. Until now I look back and I say, oh yeah, well, I can somewhat sympathize with why that ruling came out that way. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
that's one of the things we try to really instill within the group of, you have to earn the right, to say that this is corrupt. Because is it corrupt, or is it just it needs to be fixed? It
Mhm.
needs to be overhauled, right? I mean, we need some sort of a process. We need some sort of a system,
Mhm.
to manage everybody, right? To manage these situations. I think, and this is what we've based the foundation on, is it's just an antiquated system
Mhm.
with an antiquated process that needs to be modernized,
Mhm.
um, both within laws, rules, code, but also within process and functionality.
What are your thoughts on just getting rid of family court, going back down to civil court with videos and tamper-proof mics, and a parent could say, "Yes, I want 12 jurors there."
It's a great question. Um, First time I've been asked that, to be honest with you. Well, my take is that, and it's not going to be a popular take, by the way,
Mm.
but that's how I've lived my life. So,
Yeah, me too.
is that is that having 12 jurors of your peers, I think sounds awesome,
Mm.
um, but I just don't know if everybody is versed enough or has the capacity to separate themselves from their own personal situations and what they have in front of you. It's what they ask you now as a juror, right? Can you be impartial for this? Did you have somebody who was a doctor in a suit, right? So they go through these scenarios. How do you qualify a juror when you ask them, can you be impartial to a dad not having a kid, when you have a kid, right? When
Mhm,
you went through a custody issue, when you were a child of a single parent,
mhm,
household. So I think
mhm,
it's I think there's a possibility there, but I think there would have to be obviously some work there to be had, for sure.
mm. Or possibly as well as, the videos and tamper-proof mics, maybe not just one judge. Why not have 2 of them to, make a decision? Some judges, I think, need to be drug tested.
Mhm,
I'm
mhm,
sure you've seen instances where
mhm,
there's an
mhm.
issue, uh, that is not playing out right,
Yeah.
and I think maybe, they would say, "Would that will be too expensive to have 2 judges up, or that would be too expensive to have a jury."
Mhm, mhm.
It would have to be really looked at closely, but I just think family court should just be gone and take it back down to civil court, and I think it would be fairer, hopefully.
That's interesting. So now, so you would recommend with a jury or without a jury?
Well, it could be up to the parent,
Okay.
if there's, like, issues of okay, unless it's child abuse, that would be criminal court. That would have
Mhm,
to be handled by criminal court, because
mhm,
I've noticed that they're combining this, child abuse into family court,
mhm,
and it's one or the other, you
mhm,
know, and some people recommend going through criminal court first and then go through the family court after you've been cleared of these charges.
mhm, mhm. Well, much like also contempt, right? I mean,
Right.
the reality is contempt really should be, down at civil side
Mhm.
versus, just within the family court. So, there is that, there's a lot of arguments to be made about, even the jurisdiction that family courts have. Do they even have that jurisdiction if we, go back, through basically the setup, right, of the entire process. You go back all the way to England, even further
Yeah.
back, right, to Rome, and then right that whole thing in the traveling courts and
Mhm.
such. So, there are fascinating conversations to be had. Um, they're definitely thought provoking. Um, I almost wonder if one of the things that we saw, and I think it's why they started stopping so many Zooms into the courtrooms now, is
Mm.
that just having visibility, into the courtrooms, I think it's a great disinfectant, right? As they say, right?
Mhm.
Shine is a great disinfectant. Um, I almost think I like to think of things in a sense of easy wins, if you will. What's the low hanging fruits to build momentum,
Mm.
um, to change narrative, to change an image, right? Kind of chisel away at it. Um, Sometimes that's quicker than trying to get a sledgehammer.
Mhm.
So one of the things we're going to be doing on the pro se dad side is trying to introduce not legislation, but process change for that, for example. Just just let's allow just cameras all the time. We have all the technology has been set up already. All the courtrooms are already retrofitted with all that technology. So all we have to do is just turn that on.
Mhm.
So let's allow the court watchers in. I mean, we've had a few
Mhm.
instances recently that we haven't been able to go in via Zoom, to do any court watching. Um, I think that's a great, first step because
Mhm.
if I'm afraid of who's seeing what I'm doing, or I'm concerned, then I'm going
Mhm.
to make sure I'm doing the best job I am, right? Because
Mhm. Mhm.
that's why appeals work so great, right? That's why judges don't want to get appealed, but judges realize the amount of time and money that's going to take somebody to appeal me. It's gonna, what's the percentage rate? Maybe what, 20, 30%? Will
Mhm.
actually go through that entire process of an appeal, and
Mhm.
see it through, right? That's just
Right.
starting it. It's to actually see it through. Um, so, I think that judges are comfortable in that. Um, they can have immunity and that whole thing, right? That's a whole other argument with judges and such. And that's fine. But as long as what's the remedy when there's a mistake?
Mhm.
And I think that that's where more focus has to be, right? Like, why are we making it so difficult to remedy
Mhm.
obvious mistakes? Like, I understand those complex child abuse, sexual abuse and physical abuse, and listen, we all know a lot of moms who aren't good moms, a lot of dads who aren't good dads, right?
Mhm.
A lot of parents that shouldn't be parents, right? I mean, we see it all the time in the news. So, there definitely needs to be some sort of oversight, but we should be trying to err in the favor of the child and not in the favor of convenience. And I think a lot
Mhm.
of times that's what's put forth. I have an event actually with Governor Murphy coming up, of which one of the questions I introduced, to be had at the event is, are you actually willing to support not presumptive 50-50, but mandatory 50-50,
Mhm.
and work from the notion of we're going to assume that you can do 50-50,
Mhm.
and we're going to give you 50-50. You have to prove to us why you can't, as opposed to having to prove why the rights I had as a married couple or just as a dad outside of court, now I have to somehow prove them inside the court, right? It's almost the same prove it until, innocent until proven guilty. Same thing. It should be, 50-50 until proven that that can't work and
Mhm.
not the other way around, and I think that that's one of the things that we're going to try to also get out there is having that kind of an approach, to this, because I think it would remedy, you know, the authority and the power that the judges themselves and the courts have, right?
Mhm.
So if we're going to leave it in a family court, fantastic. But let's
Mhm.
just have that, as you said, let's just have that for the extreme cases.
Mhm.
That's it, right? So let's have that for those. But everything else, even in contested situations, because if it's uncontested, then yeah, maybe you get 50-50, no problem. But it's so easy to go from uncontested to contested.
Mhm.
It's too easy. That barrier just needs to be a lot more difficult to bear and to overcome, and also to de-incentivize, not saying that, moms, do it as a monetary incentive, but, some do, you know, um, to kind of de-incentivize that, to
Mhm.
de-incentivize and say, well, all right, you know what, I'm not going to go through this whole process because it's just going to end up, 50-50 anyway. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And you just kind of get back to life, let the parents figure it out.
Mhm. You know, some people can do 50-50, and these are the people we don't even see in court. These are
Mhm.
the ones that are mentally sound, they can get along even though this didn't work out, and we're not hearing from those people. I've only interviewed one couple, this was probably last summer, that were able to co-parent beautifully with their exes.
Mhm.
But unfortunately, you know, um, you get these third parties involved that start chirping in somebody's ear even when they're co-parenting kind of okay, it's okay. But then you've got someone inserting themselves where they do not belong and causing trouble, then everybody's in court.
Mhm. Mhm.
And,
Mhm.
I just wish people would, when they divorce, possibly sign a post-nup, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's funny because we considered that as almost exactly right. It's not even when after divorce, we considered on drafting, attempting to draft an agreement that when you come out pregnant,
Mhm.
right? So when you come out pregnant, that you sign. So almost like a pre-birth agreement.
Mhm.
Almost have you have a pre-birth plan at the hospital. And our thinking is if we can get that within that mainstream where it becomes just part of what you do, that
Mhm.
would circumvent anything else in the future, and you retain, that control. The thinking is what? Well, we're having a baby together, and ideally at that point we're still pretty good together.
Uh-huh.
So it should be pretty easy to say, yeah, 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 let's go ahead, let's sign this stuff, and let's notarize it, and we're good, and so forth. um and if we want to get legislation to back that, where
Mhm.
now you almost not force, but you mandate that, um doctors and clinics and hospitals need to have these agreements, much like a birth certificate.
Mhm.
We need to have this agreement signed before they give birth. You know what I mean? And now that's obviously a tall order, right? But,
Mhm.
you know, those are the kind of approaches that, we're trying to bring at this from a new path, novel, approach, ad hoc, kind of unorthodox,
Mhm.
because everything else has kind of been tried and tested, thus far. But to the point that I that you're raising, I one of the things that I find myself, um, as within the group itself, and I'm pretty proud of it. So we put a survey out, and we have 30%, 37% of the dads in our group either have 50-50 or better,
Mhm.
in their current custody arrangement, which is something, well, I'm proud of what the number is, but needs to be a lot higher, right?
Mhm.
Um, and I think that you raise an excellent point, because we have life happening at the same time when people get separated. Everybody has their circle of friends that they go to. Oh, he did that, and oh, she did that, he did that, he did that. Oh, well, he's not going to get the kids, right? And oh, girl, you don't do that, and no,
Mhm.
man, don't let her, and right. And now those walls kind of tend to kind of strengthen. So part of one of our initiatives is almost on a cultural society level, right? Is saying, hey, we just all need to change our view on this, right? We
Mhm.
all just need, not just dads, but also, moms. Moms need to realize, listen, raising a kid is tough.
Mhm.
You need the help. You know what
Mhm.
I mean? I
Mhm.
mean, I know, like in my own, case, it's it works out beautifully, right? It is 50-50, and it is no problem. I mean, we're at a point where it's like, well, hey, I can't get them from the bus stop. Can you get them? Sure.
Mhm.
And I'll pick
Right.
them up from your house later, right? Fantastic. I can go, my husband's gonna go. Fantastic. You know what I mean? I'm not there. My wife is there. Leave them there. Great. And that's how it should be,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
That's where we need to get to. So the goal is stopping that chirping right along the
Yes.
way, as you said. So
Mhm.
absolutely.
Because when we went to divorce, he was very upset, and he said, "Oh, you're gonna take these kids away from me." I said, "Oh, no, buddy. You're going to help me raise these kids." You know?
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly.
And I said, "This is how we can work it out." Grandma and grandpa can, take them on these days, because I was a per diem nurse, so, I wasn't completely full time.
Mhm.
And so the grandparents would be involved. Everyone would be seeing the grandkids. No one would be taken away from anybody,
Mhm.
until you get that third party inserting themselves in, which is very deadly. And that's why it's just, we need, post divorce nups. I don't
Mhm.
know, that, these kids aren't taken away from grandparents, and they can see everybody. However, when you get that third party inserting themselves and they start building up these parental alienation tactics and other things that can go really awry. We've got to somehow stop this. Somehow. I don't have the answer.
Absolutely. I mean, and you're absolutely right. I mean, and I think, one of the things that, I see often as well too is that at the end of those lines, even those, doctors' lines and, you know, therapists and so forth are just people who have a job, right?
Mhm,
Who are providing for their own families. Um, who I really think I give everybody the benefit of the doubt. I think everybody starts at a good place. And along the way, like many of us in our own professions, we get tired, right? It becomes boring.
mhm,
It just becomes clocking in, clocking out. And I think that the effort dies, the
mhm,
passion dies, and it just becomes a task. And it just becomes a hitting the checklist option, and I almost wonder to your exact point of stopping that cycle when these people get involved. And I'm sure you've noticed, right? If you get a young attorney 1 year with a JD, 2 years, or a young therapist, or a young gal who just got into the field, they're all in, right? And
mhm,
they are truly talking to dad, talking to mom, talking to the kid, trying to figure out solutions to really make this work versus a 20, 30-year veteran
mhm.
who is just like, yes, no, your kid said this, that means your kid hates you, your kid doesn't want to see you anymore, you suck, you don't get to see good. And that's it, right?
Right.
So it's they think like I have it down packed. Now listen, there's something to be said about experience, and maybe they've been able to identify, these key indicators, right, that we all do have out there.
Mhm,
Um, but a lot of times too, I think what we forget is that we're also still parents.
mhm,
And a lot of times we're also young and we also don't know, and maybe I'm not approaching my kid the right way. Maybe I
mhm,
shouldn't have said that, but I'm now being penalized by not being able to see my kid, as opposed to, well, then send me to some parenting class, right? Set
mhm,
me up, with a coach, set me up with a counselor, so that I continue to learn how to be a parent and still have the opportunity to be that parent. You
mhm,
know, don't say, oh, you didn't do it right the first time, your time is gone. Now
mhm,
we're gonna give it to mom, and then that becomes it. And if you want to change it, you need it, extraneous circumstances and status quo has set in, the kids in school, and now you got to go through all these hoops to make changes when you almost set me up to fail
mhm, mhm,
from the beginning because you didn't provide me with what I needed to
mhm,
succeed, So, you didn't cause me to fail, but you also didn't make it easy for me to succeed, and
mhm,
that's where I think there's so much room for opportunity. And I think there's so much, chances to work with these stakeholders. Part of our foundation's main mission statement is to work with all stakeholders to identify those opportunities and not say, you know what, we don't need a gal.
mhm,
Maybe we don't, but maybe we do, right? I mean, we don't need a therapist. Maybe we don't, maybe we do, right? The question
mhm,
is, who's determining that we do?
mhm,
And are they rightfully determining that at the right time? Because if I have to leave my marital household because I'm afraid that I'm going to get charged, right? I'm going to get a
mhm,
temporary restraining order on me. Mom is just going to call that in and I'm going to get arrested. And now I'm going to really be, out of luck. So I'm going to leave the home. I now
mhm.
have to go find a place to live that I got to pay for, right? Um, hey, Marion, I'm sorry. I need to just plug my laptop in real fast.
Oh, sure, go
Uh,
ahead.
I am so sorry. Just give me 1 second. So sorry.
Okay,
Hold on. All right.
that's okay.
Ready.
That was super fast.
Okay. Sorry about that.
That was quick.
Yeah, it was literally right there. I didn't realize that I hadn't plugged it in. So if we're able to, I think I identify that because of us needing, I think, we may need those individuals. I just think we have to modernize the approach here, right? I
Hmm.
mean, the laws that are on the books, the process and just the overall approach was for a time gone, and it
Hmm.
worked for that time, right? Moms were the primary, right? And moms
Hmm.
did stay home and all of that and the other. And it was somewhat understandable, but we have a lot of the pitfalls that are still existent today that continues, I think, to obviously hamper any true movement forward.
Hmm. Well, it's when we got divorced, we discussed, child support payment, whatever. And he told me what his lawyer told him what would happen if we went into court and what he would be living on if this all happened. And he said he would be living on only 400 a month. I said, that's really stupid. I'm a nurse. I just need a little help. I've never owned my own home before, so we came up with a figure that was, everyone could live on. And I said, you keep the house. That way, when you have the kids, the house is familiar to them. They have their own rooms. You know, it won't be so much of a shift that will be traumatizing to them. So then I said, when I get this farmhouse, I need you to help me put in a kitchen and a bathroom. And that's really all I want. We worked that out. So, we both put the kitchen in together, and the bathroom, we worked on that second floor bathroom. So, things can be worked out. I just want to see things worked out. He asked me if I had wanted alimony, and I said, no, that's kind of stupid. I don't even know why. I lost an uncle, my favorite uncle. He was a slave to alimony till he died young.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
I'm not over that yet. And I just don't think, I mean, I know there are some women that will say, well, gee, I never worked. I raised the kids, and they needed the alimony, but do you need it? How long do you need it? I mean, I don't think anyone should be a slave to it or a slave to child support.
I mean, it does, the system no longer works, right? That
Right.
that that methodology no longer just makes sense. It just doesn't make financial sense. It doesn't make sense for the kids, right? I
Right.
mean, it's so funny because, in certain sectors of our population, right? And women are equal and we can do everything that we can do and men are equal and everybody has the same rights, and then we come into court and then somehow that shifts a little bit. And what I've come to realize is that a lot of times it's not even the women that are saying, I want this. It's just the way it's already set up. It's what
Mhm.
happened in my situation, right? Is that, yeah, okay, we were having our issues, but they were exaggerated, as you said, by the players of the system. Whether if intentional or unintentional, it's just what happens because it's the way the system's set up. So,
Mhm.
you kind of come into this and it's like, yeah, okay, well, that's going to get, the traditional, schedule. Mom's going to have the kids or whatever. But what about if, as in your case, which I say all the time, mom is not even home most of the time because she's the one that was working. Dad
Mhm.
is home. Yet now it's okay that mom can get a babysitter. Dad can watch the kids, but he can't have the kids. So mom's okay to get the babysitter and do all that and the other. And so nobody's with the kids, right?
Right.
Because we have this just vague, traditional, lazy solution that worked once upon a time, and
Mhm.
we don't want to put the work in to update it, right?
Mhm.
And that's where again, and I keep coming back to this, I think is where that tipping point needs to be. And we're starting to see that, right? We're
Mhm.
starting to see not just dads themselves, but even moms in court saying, no, you know what, I want to do 50-50. I can do that. And
Mhm.
I think that moms are realizing I need the break too, right?
Mhm.
Like, I mean, yes, the money is great, but I rather have the support with the kids. And
Mhm.
what's kind of backwards and just dumbfounding is, why don't we want that as a society?
Mhm.
Why don't we want to codify that and say, no, 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 just like you figured it out while you were married, you're going to figure it out when you're not. You both have 50-50. You know what I mean? You're going to figure it out. And if one or the other really can't do it, then you figure that out within yourselves. And that, okay, well, look, no, you can have the kid 6 days, right, out of the seven, because I can't do my
Mhm.
2 days. But let me still have the right to those 2 days. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And that's where I think we also have some room in saying, just because that's the arrangement or the custody doesn't mean that that's what you have to live by right now. And as you
Mhm.
yourself, I'm sure, are experienced. Yes, once that schedule is set and once you kind of start getting along, that schedule is kind of not out the window, but it's like a suggestion, right? It's a recommendation because a lot of life happens.
Mhm.
And hey, this is happening. Can I get it for a couple hours? Sure. You
Mhm.
know what? Next week, it's his stepbrother's birthday. Can I get him for a couple hours? Right. And we're going pumpkin picking. Can I get him tomorrow? And that's what you want
Mhm.
for your kid,
Mhm.
right? You want your kid to not feel, he already physically feels the separation.
Mhm.
You don't want him to emotionally feel the separation. You want him to be able to feel, hey, dad, you know what? I have this going on. Can you pick me up and take me, whatever? Mom can't. Hey,
Mhm.
mom, I want to go hang out at the mall. Dad can't take me. Can you bring me? You know what I mean? And, mom's just passing by dad's house to get the kid to drop them off or vice versa. You
Mhm.
know, that's what we should be striving for.
Mhm.
And I think that having money tied to that and not getting into the whole Title IV, funding and all that stuff,
Oh,
but
yeah.
that's a part of it, right?
Mhm.
Having money tied to that just complicates it. And
Mhm.
I think that, if we shoot for mandated 50-50 versus presumptive, um, again, it just de-incentivizes it all, and forces parents to step up. It forces you to say, yeah, you know what? I didn't think I could do the 50-50, but I'm going to make it happen. I
Mhm.
can I can go ahead and I can do this, I can do that, I can do this, I can do that. And if I can't, all right, mom, then you do it. Then you know what? Maybe we put a clause in there, thinking it out here with you. Maybe the clause is, we're gonna do this for 6 months. Everybody keep track of what happens. In
Mhm.
6 months, we're gonna come back and we will reset the schedule should we need to, if everybody can't uphold their end.
Mhm.
Because that's what's gonna happen, right? I mean, it happened with some of the dads that I've worked with where it's like, yeah, 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 I want 50-50. And me, myself, telling him, be like, you can't do 50-50. I
Mhm.
know you can't do it, right?
Mhm.
And he gets it. And you know what? The judge, that's exactly the schedule she put forth. She said, we're going to do a 6-month trial, basically. And we'll see what happens. And then we'll come back at 6 months. And then we will, memorialize it then. If you're able to do the 50-50, and if mom's able to do it, you
Mhm.
know? And he ended up giving up one day because
Mhm.
he couldn't do it initially. But you know what also happens? Dad or mom starts to be like, hey, I can do this. I can make this work. I want to. Wow, it was amazing when I came
Mhm.
home and my daughter was home and she welcomed me. Man, I would love to have that,
Mhm.
more nights. You know what I mean? So I am going to try to do this. I am going to talk to my boss. You know what? I'm going to leave my company, right? I'm going to go work somewhere else so that I can be here, right? Because if money is no longer the main driver, I'm not going to get imputed and all that stuff because we have equal overnights. So the calculations are going to be pretty close to it anyway, right?
Right.
So I think obviously that it would help that quite a bit as well. So that's just some thinking on that end.
So how do we get rid of this Title 4D? Everyone wants to get rid of it. I would like to see it gone. It's making slaves out of people. People are committing suicide over it. And it's a disaster when they signed in 1997 ASFA. It just needs to go away.
This is one of those things again that I fall back to in that how do you fund then the process? Like, right? I mean, I don't know if we could ever really get rid of, I think it's accountability. I think it comes down to there needs to be funding of some sort, right? If we have, let's just even say with this process that we have now. So how do we make sure that what we're allocating is being used for what it's supposed to be used? Right? That's literally the same issue all the way down to the actual child support payment, right? Dads have the biggest issue, and I say dads in general because dads are usually the ones, not that they exclusively pay child support, but normally dads are the ones, right? So let's just say any parent. A parent who has to pay child support, the biggest issue they have is the other parent is taking that money and not using it for the child. There's no accountability, right?
Right.
And I know that if dads would rather purchase, or the parent paying child support would rather purchase the products and give them versus giving them money, right? Of course, it's for their child. They would have no problem doing that. The issue is I don't trust where the money is going. It's that same distrust that occurs in the entire pipeline. So if we include accountability from inception, from the cradle, all the way to the grave, when we're actually paying it out, I think a lot of those issues somewhat kind of go away because now you have visibility. Same thing with visibility into the courtroom, right? Is just unveil it. Just unveil what's happening, where, and although there is reporting as to where obviously that money goes, but okay, so if it is going and it's being allocated to certain districts and certain judges and so forth, depending on outcomes and depending on all this and the other, let's get behind that and really see why was that money allocated there? What did the judge do with it? What did the courthouse and what did everybody who had a hand in it get out of it? Was there a rate of return on it? And at the end of the day, did it push forward the building of a new family, that's at stake here? Because that's what all this money is for, right? Is to build a new family relationship, a new family cohesion. So did we allocate and utilize that money correctly? So I assume, so if we got rid of it, what's your thoughts on it?
Well, like you had said, the parent would buy things for the child. Each parent would buy whatever the child needs. Not necessarily what the child wants, because you know how some of them are. They have to, teenagers need to know what budgets are too. If the parent can't afford it, you just don't go running to the other parent who can afford it. And there's got to be like really good communication, because if, say, Johnny wants those, 220 pair dollar Nikes that one parent can't afford, the parents have to get together and say, hey, we got to stop this. He wants this, that, and the other thing. And people aren't there saying, okay, Johnny, you come over here and I'll buy this for you if you stay here with me. and then I can go after that one for more child support. But the
Mhm.
problem also is that goes hand in hand with that is there are these corrupt judges that impute a figure on a parent that they cannot ever
Mhm.
afford, and the judge is not reading the file as to how one parent uh, was terminated from a position or lost, their job. They're just rattling off figures,
Mhm. Mhm.
even down in the support domestic relations offices. There's a lot
Mhm.
of shady business going on down there that's killing parents
Mhm.
and destroying families.
Mhm. And it is, I mean, and it's a shame because I think that if there's no accountability, for it, um, then you can't give public officials, court officials the benefit of the doubt, and
Mhm,
you have no trust there. And if there is no trust, then nothing's going to work. You're always going to doubt everything and every product that comes out of that court system.
mhm,
Um, you know, I there needs to be that accountability,
mhm,
right? And I think that, at least for me personally, once an error is able to be identified, what's the course of action at that point? It goes back to what we were saying earlier, right? Fixing obvious errors
mhm,
should not be a tall order. You
mhm,
should be able to immediately turn around and say, listen, they miscalculated.
mhm,
Listen, these aren't the correct numbers, and immediately, and a lot of times, as you well know, right? You go and you try to bring it up. No, that's what it is. It's already
mhm,
calculated. You have to file a motion, right? Go through that whole ringer.
mhm,
Um, and so there needs to be, is it an additional oversight committee? Not the
mhm,
appellate court, but is there, just, a watchdog committee
mhm,
that, one can go to that's going to be able to make and have the authority to make those changes? But do we even want that? Do we now want somebody else into the mix as well, right? I mean,
yeah.
that's just adding, a whole other entity into what's a crazy situation. Um, I think that if we leave it up to the parents,
Mhm,
then the parents that can't afford to do that, you do have one who doesn't work, one that does work. The one that does work doesn't want to give any money, right?
mhm,
Then it forces the other parent to now have to go, and what? So she's going to file, or she's going to go on unemployment, welfare, and then go through that whole process, as well. So money is going to get funneled out and to that parent, regardless to one source or another. Um, Everybody else is going to be on the hook for that through one source or another. Um, because of the society we want to be, right? I mean, we could be a little barbaric, right? And
mhm,
say, hey, this is your child, right? So if it lives, it lives, it's on you. If it dies, it dies. I mean, you have to be responsible for making sure that it's got food and clothes and shelter and all of that.
mhm,
But that's not the society we're in. So, once we make the decision that everybody deserves a bare minimum lifestyle,
mhm,
everybody is on the hook for it, right?
mhm,
So, and then somebody has to be in place to determine who it goes to and who it doesn't.
mhm,
Um, and then that opens that person up for possible corruption,
mhm,
right? Because they say, wow, look at all this money coming through here. I can, siphon off here. I can siphon off there. I can reallocate here, reallocate here. I have buddies that I can call in and set them up, you know,
mhm,
as court appointed, gals, and, they don't do any work, but they're getting money. And it's just a ripe for abuse, you know.
mhm,
Um, and and you know what? And I think I like that term. and that's what it is. It's an abuse. It's an abuse of the system.
Mhm, mhm.
Because we need. I really still continue to believe me. We need something in place. It just needs to be something better.
Right.
You
I
know,
agree.
that's
Mm.
that's why I
It-
continue to kind of to fall out.
yeah. Well, I know like you're working on legislation with the 50-50, and how far along are you with that?
Well, that we're in very, very early stages of just, doing what we call basically template driving. So in
Mhm,
speaking with some of the legislators from on the pro se side of introducing, this possible approach.
mhm,
Because we don't even have 50-50 presumption, right? I mean,
mhm,
so to think that people are going to do 50-50 mandatory is quite the reach. But we see it as an opening in order to be able to address some of these other inefficiencies,
mhm,
right? So that you know we can just look at, listen, this is where we kind of need to be, and the reason why is because of this perfect storm.
mhm,
Even a 50-50 presumption doesn't do anything to remedy, what I feel is kind of like that perfect storm, right? Where
mhm,
dad has to leave the house, he has to get a house, his own house, and he's paying. Mom files temporary orders. He doesn't know how to respond. He doesn't respond correctly. Now he lost custody. He has child support, temporary child support. He has temporary alimony. He can't afford to get an attorney now, right? And now
mhm,
he's making too much to even get legal aid
mhm,
because
mhm,
his income. So dad immediately, before even that final order is in, is already, right? He's already in a tough situation. So, what we feel is by having these let's just call them discussions, if you will, is it allows us to highlight just how inadequate that process is, all before even a judge has decided with a final judgment of divorce, right?
mhm,
So why is that, right? Like, why is dad handcuffed, typically dad, or why is one parent handcuffed almost immediately out of the gate just because of circumstances, right? Just
mhm,
because of the way things played out. There are many situations where, you know, these filings occur and you're not even aware that they occurred because you're still
mhm,
together. You still think everything is fine. Then all of a sudden, now you're getting these court orders, you have temporary hearings coming up, and you're not even prepared. Meanwhile,
mhm,
the other parent has been preparing for months, has spoken to
mhm,
attorneys, has spoken to friends, and all of a sudden now you're caught, off guard. You're gonna lose in court because you have no idea what the hell's going on. You're not even gonna
mhm,
retain an attorney or anything because you don't know what the hell's happening. A lot of
mhm,
times you're notified the day before the hearing, if you're notified at all. Then default judgments go in, and all of this before a judge who's part of this process, and we are going to
mhm,
say should be the one to make this determination, has even gotten wind of what you're going through.
mhm,
And we feel like, listen, maybe what we should just do is basically put a temporary halt on any filings, you know what I
mhm,
mean? Or if there is going to be an order, then it's mandatory 50-50 until that judgment of divorce,
mhm,
right? So don't give one parent the upper hand over the other simply because of situations, simply because of family decisions that I'm going to work, you stay home. So while I'm at work, you're able to be on the internet researching and preparing,
mhm.
you know, to
Yeah.
to leave, right? While
Yeah.
I'm bringing money in, and now all of a sudden I'm now, caught off guard. I look at my accounts, all the money is gone, right? We see that time and time again, right?
Mhm.
Everything's been transferred out. Mom has new accounts. You know, you find yourself in that predicament. You know what I mean? So that's part of the things that we're trying to kind of start getting just that idea out there to open up that opportunity. Meanwhile, through the foundation of trying to secure, donations and sponsors and grants to allow us to start to set up education for pro se parents, whether
Mhm.
mom or dad, so that if they find themselves in one of those scenarios immediately, they can go somewhere and to somebody and get well versed and well informed as to what you need to do immediately, right?
Mhm.
Like you need to show up in court. You need to, submit a reply to her complaint, right? You need to
Mhm.
do these things are which are very minimal. They're very minimal tasks that I want to say more than half of dads, especially, don't even know they need to do, don't
Mhm.
even know how to do, right?
Mhm.
So if we eliminate those early pitfalls, I think that we can change the overall trajectory down the
Mhm.
path. So, that's what we're living. So we're trying to live at the inception of it all,
Mhm.
either by holding off any filings or having the resources to be able to guide dads and parents in general almost immediately.
What do you do when you have these judges that are in collusion with opposing attorneys and I mean, as soon as you walk in there, you're doomed. You could walk in there with a Hollywood team of attorneys and you're doomed.
There's nothing worse than which I've gotten with dads where you go and either you see the attorneys all talking together with the bailiffs
Yes.
and the clerks, and the judge comes out and just your normal, hey, how are you? And I mean, I go back to, if we look at it, I always try to look at it from a human perspective first. If we look at it from a human employment perspective, this is a judge's job. This is the attorney's job. He ends up that his firm is in this particular district, jurisdiction, and he's in front of this judge a lot, right? So
Mhm.
you're gonna form natural bonds and relationship with people you see all the time. Yeah, do you have to go out, play golf with them and go to all these dinners? Maybe not, right? But
Right.
but even just in the normal working of things, that's going to kind of form. You raise a great point though, and in addition to the foundation, which is a C3, we're going to form a C4, a nonprofit, which will allow us to be advocates, but also allow us to retain our own attorneys. So
Mhm.
much like ACLU has their own attorney and their own foundation, we're basically mirroring that, but on the family law side. And the
Mhm.
reason being is exactly what you just said. Is what we want to do is we want to have our own attorneys so that they don't have any fear of repercussions
Mhm.
of going up against a judge, calling a judge's attention to, let's just say, maybe incorrectly viewing a certain statute or a certain case law or not applying it correctly, right?
Mhm.
Because I know from when I worked at the law firm, listen, these attorneys, they get bigger clients by having a lot of victories. They get a lot of victories by winning in court, right? They win in court by, you know, you appease the kingmaker,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So it's just the way the process is set up. So our approach is, well, you know what? So let's break that cycle. We'll bring in our own counsel and we'll bring in counsels out of district, so and out
Mhm.
of jurisdiction, so that
Mhm.
you don't have to be concerned with, number one, we're your client, so you have a salary, you are retaining, and you don't have to worry about that, right? So you don't have to worry about your victories. And secondly, you may not see that judge ever again, right?
Mhm.
Because we've allowed you to get temporary license in that state or whatever the case is. So that's how I think we can have great success
Mhm.
in moving that forward on the family law side, like the ACLU does on the civil side. And that also will afford us the opportunity to appeal a lot more cases. And we actually may have one that we're looking at now in Minnesota where we feel we can set precedents
Mhm.
in that particular case. So, our goal is going to be to hopefully at one point to be able to basically, help everybody. But out of the gate is to kind of cherry pick these kind of, you know, disruptive cases,
Mhm.
put some media behind it, put some social media behind it, put some press behind it, and try to set precedents with these cases, with what we have and what we can do. Um, because if we have that capability and judges start to know, much like they do know with the ACLU, right?
Mhm.
Once the ACLU gets involved, they know, like, all right, well, they have unlimited money, unlimited donations that they can take this as far as they want. So let's go ahead and let's just do right what we need to.
Mhm.
So that's how we're kind of looking at that.
Okay. Well, I don't want to keep you all evening, but I have one last question. What do you do when, a mom or dad calls you and said there's something weird going on? The judge is acting weird. The opposing side has called out parental alienation. What do I do now?
Yeah, I mean, that unfortunately happens more often than not. Our first approach, and it's our suggestions because, we're not attorneys and we can't give, legal advice. So our recommendations and suggestions as if that was us and we were going through that scenario, is to, depending on where they're at in their case, is to try to either counter, with their own, experts, if you will, if they're in therapy, if they're in with any psychologist or anything of that sort. But also start to kind of get things on the record, which
Mhm.
really doesn't happen that often. A lot of times, we have found that if, for an example, right, one of the traits of an actual parent doing some alienation is, interfering with custody and parenting time, right?
Mhm.
Child
Mhm.
not being available, the child not being there, and so forth, and just working on
Mhm.
that. One of the things that we suggest is, and we try to demonstrate, is how to easily file a child custody interference, which most states actually have a statute to go down to your local police department, file that report. The following day, get a copy of that report, go to court, file a 2-page motion of enforcement and relief for that time back, right? And
Mhm.
is to begin to just continue to pepper that
Mhm.
every single time it happens,
Mhm.
because it starts to kind of demonstrate that, hey, well, this picture that this doctor is painting, right, that mom is painting, is maybe not really what reality may be, because I'm seeing here, dad has filed 15, enforcements
Mhm.
with evidence that he went to get the child and the child wasn't there, right?
Mhm.
Dad has submitted, this is another we attempt to suggest to dads, is, you combat, whether if you're victorious or not in court, you're going to need to combat parental alienation regardless.
Mhm.
Even if you get 50-50, right?
Mhm.
A misconception is that, oh, once I get there, we're done. No, no, no.
Mhm.
If anything, sometimes you've just begun, right?
Right. Right.
Because what's happening at that point, it's like, oh, no, 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 no. if you think that somehow, I'm going to give this up or give that up, right? And it just really intensifies. So,
Mhm.
so we try to focus on you're learning a skill here, right? You're learning a different way of thinking, of viewing, and of living. You're learning how to be able to identify where those opportunities for the alienation to occur that empower the other parent, right? And
Mhm.
eliminating that. And we see a lot of those opportunities, not just with just the regular phone calls, right? Which happens not with the pickups, but in schools, right? With
Mhm.
teachers, extracurricular activities with the doctors, with birthday parties, right? So it, it's a lot more than just what the other parent saying to the
Mhm.
child. It's those, and it's probably even more devastating, is those subconscious actions.
Mhm.
It's the at a particular, extracurricular activity that you're at, and the other parent not allowing the child to go and greet, you know, the other parent, right? It's
Mhm.
showing and demonstrating, no, you're here with me, you're not going to do that, right? So, you know, a lot of times we have to be able to kind of preempt that, right? We have to be
Mhm.
able to understand that it's something, that I had experience with in of saying, hey, you know what, I'm going to go to your game. I may not be able to say, goodbye to you or good night, but no, I love you. I'm going to be watching it. We'll talk about the game when you get home,
Mhm.
the following day. So that it takes it off of the child's shoulder. And
Mhm.
more importantly, it clips the wings off the other parent. So
Mhm.
if you eliminate that, opportunity to demonstrate, that I think that goes a long way. And I found success,
Mhm.
personally. Because I go back to almost what I said in the beginning. We're good now. We're great now, right?
Mhm.
Mom and I. And I almost think that was also a product of the process.
Mhm.
It's because while you're there, you understand that, oh no, hold up. The child can't want to be with the other parent, or else it's gonna look like I'm not gonna get custody and they're gonna get custody. So I gotta interfere, I gotta hold the child back, right? Oh,
Mhm.
if the child is saying I want to go over there, that's not good, because
Mhm.
then the therapist is going to see that, right? Or the custody evaluator is going to hear that, and they're going to go ahead and say, "Oh, okay, well, no, the child wants to be with, with parent A, or the child wants to be with parent B." So, you know, a lot of times, again, the other parent is doing it. Maybe they should know better, but they're
Yeah.
sometimes also just doing it as a byproduct. Like it's
Mhm.
just kind of what you do, right? Like, no, if I can't watch them, you're not going to watch them. I'm going to get my sister to watch them.
Mhm.
I'm going to get the next door neighbor to watch them, right?
Mhm.
And you just fall into that routine of what separating and divorced parents are and how they act. And a lot of this is just breaking that whole stigma,
Mhm.
which then correlates down to that parental alienation, because again, that doesn't stop at 50-50. If
Mhm.
anything, a lot of times it just gets worse. I just think we need to do a better job of preempting and
Mhm.
eliminating those opportunities and those options.
Mhm. Well, I'm really glad I had you on, but I have one more question, and then I promise I'll let you go. Okay, so
As you can see, I don't have a problem answering questions. Thank you,
okay,
though.
so what do you do? Okay, because when I was told to pick up the kids at a certain time, I'd go over and the lights were on and no one was home.
Mhm,
So we would then go to the state police and fill out a form. They
mhm,
would then call the DA on call who said, "There's nothing we can do. They're in a custody trial, so, there's nothing we can do." And, I remember calling the ex-mother-in-law and saying, "Where are my kids?" And I still remember her guttural, nasty, "I don't know where your sons are." It was very creepy. And then I hung up. I hung
Uh,
up. But it's like, what does a parent do when the police aren't going to intervene? Even though you've got a judge's order saying you can see these kids for X amount of hours, and the other one's withholding. I mean, I think the police should be doing a little bit more. Uh, a parent showing you a judge's order, go get the kid. I don't know.
yeah, yeah. It's tough. I I'm on the fence with that because from a child's perspective, right? That's always that counter argument, right? Like, do you want the child is in the house, and do you want a police officer going and saying, "Come on, you have to leave," and going with the other parent, right?
Mhm,
Um, and so I don't know from that perspective
mhm,
if that's the best solution. But then again, that
mhm,
child's not having that bonding time with the other parent, which is
mhm.
also emotionally harmful to them, right? So,
Yeah.
you are the child is experiencing, two emotional traumas, anyway,
Mhm,
one more adversely than the other. Um, I think that I personally, and I think with what we recommend is just to continue filing and then filing with the court.
mhm,
That I have seen has worked out well in the long run. It's not an immediate fix, and it's
mhm,
frustrating. I think one of the biggest things that we have to contend with is that why does she always win?
mhm,
Why does the other parent always get the right of way? I always feel like I'm losing. I always feel like I'm giving up. Um, and a lot of times that is true, and that is what's happening. But
mhm,
once I learned not only how to file in the process, but I learned the rules
mhm,
of the game, if you will. I baked in what the process was, what the players' stakes were, right? And I conceded to that and said,
mhm,
okay, so if that is the case, then let me make sure I'm on record because
mhm,
I know that the probably the biggest driver for a judge is the fear of getting appealed, right?
mhm,
And you get too many of those and you're not going anywhere, right? So, and
mhm,
everybody has these grand visions, right? Everybody wants, to ride the scales. So you threaten that ride,
mhm,
and that does wonders. So the only way that I have found, you really affect change with judges is you get it on the record. And that's why a lot
mhm,
of judges will try not to hold their hearings, right? A lot of
mhm,
judges will say, no, 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 you guys go talk about it. No, 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 no. You guys discuss it, bring me a consent order, right? Yes, their docket is full and that's understandable. But the reality I feel is it's less on the record. The only thing they have
mhm,
on the record is, this is FD, 224, et cetera, and we're hereby, submitting a consent order. So I think that getting on the record is probably one of the most powerful tools that we
mhm,
don't utilize enough. And I see, I see, and I advise that, or I suggest, better said, that the easiest way to get on the record is when mom, you go to pick up the kids and you can't get them.
mhm,
It's it is probably the easiest no-brainer win that you will get in family court.
mhm,
It's black and white, right? I mean, you showed up, she wasn't there, you have evidence of it, you have a report, you file.
mhm,
It's black and white. You put the judge on notice,
mhm,
right? You put the judge. Are we not, right, a courtroom of law and of enforcement? Here we
mhm,
have a standing order. Here she's broken that order. Here's the relief I seek. It's your move, judge. What are you going to
Mhm.
do on the record? Right? It's like chess. What are you going to do? And I tell you, 8 out of 10 times, judge is going to come back. He's going to give you that relief. He's going to sanction the additional days, and he'll make a comment tomorrow.
Mhm.
Okay, let's try to be there next time.
Mhm.
4 or 5 times in, the judges they turn. I've seen them. I've seen it. And not because they want to turn. I don't think they care. I mean, I
Mhm.
don't. I mean, like, I don't think they care. I just think they realize, like, okay, something's amiss here, and I have to change here a little bit with it.
Mhm.
So that's how I would handle. I would handle that. I mean, and then I would apply the same thing I would apply to like the games. Be like, hey, bud, I'm gonna, supposed to get you on Saturday. I'm gonna try my best. If we're not there, then I'll see you as soon as I can. Just know I'm thinking
Mhm.
about you. I love you. Look at the stars. My
Mhm.
love is
Mhm.
waiting there for you. And that was just always my take on it.
Mhm. Well, I appreciate talking to you. And how can people reach you if they have any questions?
Awesome. Well, we have a couple of ways. Obviously, we have prosaydad.com that has an actual a little bit of an intake form that they can fill out.
Mhm.
The most efficient way though is probably to join our Facebook group. It's called Pro Say Dad Group. You can type that into the search and that'll come up, and then you could find some information or support and donate to our foundation at prosafamilyfoundation.com. We are extremely excited about what we have going on there. We actually, if I could just make a brief mention of it, have an opportunity with a partnership in Texas with a legal resource center in Austin, where working with them and under a limited grant for being able to offer dads free representation in
Mhm.
Texas who had their parental rights terminated by CPS or
Oh,
Family Services of Texas. So, we're really excited about that initiative and that partnership. We'll have more information on that. So, if anybody in Texas falls under that criteria, by all means, obviously reach out as well. And that's kind of the things that we're going to be looking to do a lot more of across the country is setting up situations like that.
okay. I'm glad to know that. Okay. So, I still would like to have you come back on again if you like.
If you would have me, it would be a pleasure. I absolutely enjoyed this conversation, and I thank you for the opportunity to be a guest.
Oh, definitely. I appreciate it. It went by quick. So I
It,
really
it really did. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Don't jump off. Slam the Gavel is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these family courtrooms. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, and Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. Please join us again here with Anthony Kensell in the future and other exciting guests. Thank you so much, Anthony.
Thank you once again.